Welcome to the AppSec Insiders Podcast. I'm Jared, and I have, Iman is with me, ever my sidekick. We are your hosts today, sometimes joined by Jordan and Farshad, who will be in our next episode. As always, this is a show where we will explore the ever-evolving and intriguing world of application and cloud security. But before we get into today's discussion, a few housekeeping items. To meet us in person, check out our events page, or we'll also probably be in your area, so feel free to come say hello. In particular, this coming month, we will be at the Collision Conference. That is June 26th, 27th, and I believe the third day on the 28th in Toronto. The Collision Conference is one of, if not the biggest tech, probably one of tech conferences in the world, really. I mean, it's humongous. I was there last year. Just about every company you can imagine is there. There's also really cool talks from all sorts of people. We're there. We had a great time talking to people from other vendors and all types of people who could be potential clients and potential vendors and potential partners. It's a great time. I recommend you come out and see it. And it's open to the public. You just have to register. The other thing is that we've recently launched the beta of our Eureka DevSecOps platform. So check out our site and join the beta program. It's a pretty cool app. I've done some work on it myself. If you're an AppSec professional and you're looking for an opportunity to work with some of the best in the industry, or even if you're just a developer with an interest in cybersecurity, be sure to check out our careers page at forwardsecurity.com/careers. We're interested in having you. Lastly, if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing and sharing with anyone you think maybe who you think may enjoy it. That would mean a lot to us. What will we be discussing today?
Yeah, actually, we are going to talk about ASVS. Actually, this is our Bible kind of, application security tests.
Why is that? Was it passed down to us from a mountain, or why do we find it so important?
I believe it's a God-sent book that actually ASVS stands for Application Security Verification Standard. It's a framework developed by OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project, and an online community dedicated to web application security. And ASVS provides a basis for testing web application technical security controls, as well as any kind of app where security is needed. The standard provides a list of security requirements and controls, and this is like, I believe there are near 300 something checks based on the level that we select. Like there are different levels. Exactly. Level 1, level 2, level 3. We have created our level 0 also. This is not official though. And the ASVS standard is divided into various sections. And actually we will cover the 14 categories of the ASVS. And in general, I would highly suggest. I've seen, I've talked with many application security guys here and there, and I've seen that people, they're not using ASVS, they're using OWASP top 10. But I would highly suggest you guys to use ASVS and even try to help the project. I've submitted more than dozens of issues, and they've accepted many of them.
That's right, because it's open source, right?
Yeah, and I can talk about that later on, about the missing stuff that ASVS didn't have, and I kind of proposed that. And let's talk about the first category, which is architecture, design, and threat modeling. And before that, if you have any point on ASVS, go ahead, Jared.
Oh yeah, well, I did want to add one thing, just to give some people a bit of context for anybody who hasn't heard of it or used it, or even have heard of it but don't know why people use it. So just to give you a picture in your mind, it's a long list of the different types of things you should look for when you're pen testing a website, or all the different types of things you want to look for when you're securing your not website necessarily, but your web app, and even it goes into networking a little bit. So it's a long list. Each tiny little check, I think there's more than 350 of them in total, but they're split into levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, as Iman mentioned. And level 3 is like you're a bank, or you're somewhere, a medical service somewhere that's really, you really got to be careful with your data. Level 2 would be like if you're storing maybe any kind of payment data, but like you're a retailer, more like, or if you have some kind of internal secrets that you want to keep safe. Level 1 would be like, you have a blog or something like that. You're not necessarily storing anything vital, but you don't want your app to be broken into. And then it's broken down further into the categories, which we're about to get into. And the categories are the categories of breaches, right? So you have your stored cryptography, authentication verification, data protection. Then there's the big one, which is about validation and sanitization of your code. That's where all the fun, juicy stuff is. There's one about software development lifecycle, one about another category about TLS. And as you go through these as you go through all of them, you sort of give them a pass-fail on your application. That's what we do as pen testers. So whenever we use this on an app, what we do is we go through each of the items in all of the relevant categories for that app. And if it doesn't apply, it doesn't apply. But otherwise, we try to test that. So for instance, make sure that SQL injection, make sure that SQL queries don't use, I'm not reading it verbatim, but it would be something like make sure SQL queries, are parameterized. So for that, you could do dynamic testing. You can also do source code testing. And in fact, it's recommended that you do source code testing for most of these. Almost all of them can be checked with source code testing. Some of them cannot, like the TLS, and some of them are software development lifecycle related, things like that. But most of the injection stuff can be checked with source code. Okay, that was going on a bit of a tangent here. To come back to it, we use this checklist when we're pen testing an app because it ensures that we search through every nook and cranny of the app and are thorough every single time we look at an app. We look at all the same things every time, and we don't forget any particular categories when going through an application. That's the main reason to use it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. Also, we have WSTG, maybe later on, Web Application Security Testing Guide. Mm-hmm. Later on, we can cover that in another episode. And, if you want to talk about first category, which is architecture, design, and threat modeling, it explores how a secure software development lifecycle can protect systems from threats. And also, it discusses the importance of secure authentication, session management, access control, in architectural level, actually. For example, it talks about CI/CD pipeline, and it talks about following all the best practices to have a secure SDLC, doing threat modeling. The sooner we find the issue is much cheaper for us to find it. To fix that, actually. To fix that. And for example, if we find an issue, let's assume we are following Agile, Scrum, Kanban, there are a bunch of tickets, we should go through them. If at the design level, for example, if we are logging some stuff, if we have a security champion and if they start to think maliciously and come up with some evil scenarios, for example, do we store secrets or headers, and in the header there's bearer token, do we store that or not? And if we think about them before implementation, then we take care of all these cases. Let's assume we don't care about that, and in production suddenly there is a breach and hackers, they can see our logs, and now I don't know, API keys, jaw token, they're all being disclosed. The sooner we find it, it's cheaper to fix it, actually. This is kind of the mantra of this section. And Jared, go ahead if you have any idea about what do you think about this category, and we can talk about that.
No, I think you pretty much covered it. I don't know what I would even add to that. It's a perfect covering. Here we're looking at SDLC. We want to know about documentation, kind of what I would call the boring parts of security. But that's because they're not flashy, but they're more long term. They don't have that short term, I just found something fun in your code kind of feeling when you're pen testing. But these are the things, these are the long term protections that you put in place. And it's about changing processes of your development team and changing their mentality and adding training, and but also adding things like code scanners, and just other types of dynamic scanners, things like that to your pipeline.
Exactly. In order to have we had an episode about securing CI/CD itself. Also, we need some scanners to secure our code. For example, we need to have SAST, we need to have DAST, and we need to have vulnerable dependency checkers. And nowadays, all of us, we are using some third parties, some, I don't know, open source libraries, and many of those others are anonymous. Suddenly, they might start to do funky stuff, like, or having a vulnerable code. And we are using them, and that brings some securities to us. Because of that, we need to use some stuff such as, we are not sponsored by a Snyk or Meshbase or anything like that, but we can use those scanners to find vulnerable packages. And also for SaaS, if you want to go with free stuff, SemGrab is a good thing. For open source project, I believe you can use CodeQL, but for non-open source project, CodeQL is a bit expensive. And I believe, for DAS also, you can use Zap. And some of our customers, we tell them to, have container scanners such as Claire in their environment, or if they're using Terraform codes, have TFSec or something like that. And it helps you to find vulnerabilities before attackers find them. And also it helps you to find them before the pen testers that you hire find them, actually.
Mhm.
And also we would suggest to install some plugins on your IDs. Like for example, I believe SonarQube, all of them, they have some plugins that you can install and use it for free or for commercial version. And even when you do that, then when they're writing the code, even before they want to push the code, they can see, the issue. Also, I've seen many scenarios that, especially in a student projects, like they put like security secrets, related secrets, such as, I don't know, the AWS secrets, and they push it in their GitHub, and suddenly they will receive like a $10,000 bill. And this is not only limited to student projects. I've seen like even big customers, they might have this issue. But that's the thing. You should have Git secrets, or there's also truffle hog. You can use that. They have different methods to find them. Find these
And the more the
issues.
better. I mean, yes, the more scanners you add, the more false positives you can potentially amass. But also, scanners will use different rules and find different things. So there's a bit of a balance to be had there. But there's not necessarily anything wrong with adding more scanners, except that you will add to your list of false positives that eventually you need to click through and add them to your list of suppressions so that they don't appear in future scans. But over a long period of time, more scanners is more better.
And that's the thing. For example, if you have installed SemGrab and found some issues, there are some ways to flag false positive based on rules and by commenting them. And for the first time that you are running them, you need to put a lot of time to remove all false positive, and after that you can run them in blocking mode. We would highly suggest to run your SAST and VDC in blocking mode, and if it's possible. But for DAS, it takes sometimes, some of our customers, it takes like, I don't know, 10 hours to run their DAS. Because of that, it doesn't we don't expect them to run it in blocking mode. But in general, some scanners, we need to run them in blocking mode, especially the secrets one. We should never push any secret to any repo, actually. And yeah, that's it. And do you have any other items to discuss around this category, Jared?
No, let's talk about category 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
Category 2 is authentication verification. So here we're talking about passwords. We're talking about not necessarily session token management, although there's a little bit of that. There's a whole separate section just about authenticating from the session token. But the initial point of authentication, this whole category covers that. It covers things like password management, password length, rate limiting. Let's see what else we have here. Just stuff about the registration form, helping people pick stronger passwords. Having CAPTCHAs, not using email as a two-factor, because email is plain text. I'm just picking random ones here. Let's see, using 2FA, using FIDO tokens for 2FA or U2F tokens. Soon they're going to have to add one of those categories for the passwordless entry, which I don't see anything for that here, but they'll have to add that soon. about how
Exactly.
the initial password is generated, about how sharing secrets. It's a long section, this one. It covers it's very comprehensive. And most of it, I think, is L2. For L1, it's mostly some of the basic things. Make sure that your passwords are safe and not guessable.
And
Yeah.
one of the threat scenarios that we we see a lot in this category, based on the ASVS items that we fail, we chain them and we write one threat scenario. Maybe there are, like, for one threat scenario, maybe even 10 items or 20 items are involved. But for example, one of them that I would remember right now is credential stuffing. And usually even the people that use Auth0, they have some features to kind of protect them against, like, using breach password, but they're not using that. And that is not good, because for myself, even, like, there's a website called Have I Been Pound. Just go and look at it, and you can see that if I put one of my old emails that I've created, I don't know, in 2002 or something like that, and I was involved in, like, tens of breaches, like,
Yeah, me too.
Zynga, Poker Zynga, and like all the breaches I was
Yeah.
there actually.
Adobe, LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to reuse my password, and that was a bad habit. And I believe, like, 70% of people are doing that based on one of the research that I've seen. And let's assume, like, you go and you use, like, a shitty e-commerce website, and later on, even they don't hash the password, and later on someone hack that e-commerce website, and you reuse that password, like, in your Gmail or other places. And you can see that they can easily buy those databases from dark web forums and websites, and now they can kind of try those passwords and log into your environment. And especially, like, some cryptocurrency like exchange, such as, I don't know, Coinbase, and don't reuse your password in anywhere that is sensitive. Like, and even in your email, you might think your email is not that important, but your SIN number is there, your, I don't know, your tax returns are there, and they can abuse it. And the other option that I can see here is, like, MFA. Always use we should always enforce MFA for admin functionalities. I know, like, people, they don't like to have MFA. I completely understand that, but for admin functionalities, you should enforce MFA. And there are many good items here that we can talk, but we can keep it brief and short,
Yeah.
and
There's
later on
14
we can
categories. So,
yeah, maybe we
yeah.
need to break down these episodes.
Yeah.
Uh,
If we don't get through summarizing all of them in this episode, we'll have to do another one. And then I think what we should do later is go through one category at a time and have a whole separate episode, because some of them, even some of the slower, less interesting ones, there's a lot of really good information in there.
yeah.
And there's actually one I wanted to point out in this section, which I always find interesting. I always end up having to explain it to clients. Which is, let me see where it is, something about composition rules, right? So they say, I can't find the exact verification item, but it's in here somewhere. So there's an ASVS item that says that you should not, and this is going to be interesting, this is going to surprise a lot of people, you should not be forcing users to have a password that has mixed rules, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, symbols. Because yes, it makes for a stronger password. Yes, because it increases the entropy, the amount of symbol types required to crack it. However, there has been studies and research done, and NIST themselves, after looking at the research, has decided that it's no longer secure to do this, to require people to make passwords like that. Why? Because we are humans with soft human brains. And when you're required to create a super complex password like that, the chances are, if you're not using a password manager, like 90% of people out there, 90% are not using one. When you're forced to create a password like that, you're going to have to write it down somewhere. So now it's not safe. It's written down somewhere. Or you're going to use the same 1 or 2 passwords everywhere, which we now go back to credential stuffing. If one of those systems gets breached, the attackers will find those lists on the dark web and try them against every online service and eventually crack into one of these services. And it's because of these complicated passwords that people just can't, there's just no feasible way to remember it. And listen, there are tricks and tips I've heard. One is kind of an interesting one. I don't know if I necessarily recommend it, but it's interesting. I think, in theory it works. You write down, you can have a book even of all your passwords, really long, complex passwords. You write them all down. But in your head, you store a key. So you say like, oh, every time the letter E appears, 2 letters back, I'll add a 5. Or every time the letter R appears, I replace it with KZ or something like that. You know what? Really just use a password manager. That's the best way to go about it. And let it generate random passwords for you. But what do they suggest instead? What does ASVS suggest instead? Instead of composition rules, have a password strength meter. So you sort of gamify producing a strong password. So as somebody types in their password, they see that bar get longer and go from red to orange to green. And at green, they feel safe, right? And if your strength meter is made correctly, then it'll be a true sense of security, not just a false sense of security. And the passwords can be pass phrases made up of words. Especially, here's another interesting tip is that if some of those words are misspelled or spelled in a funny way, not all of them, just some of them, then it like increases the entropy by tenfold, because otherwise a passphrase is just now a 4-character password made from characters from the English dictionary. But if you use words that are misspelled, or if you use names, people's names, things like that, these are still things that you can remember, much easier to remember, but still also impossible to crack. But use a password manager.
I mean, people, they can use password meter, and that helped them, actually. That helps them.
Yeah, it makes people want to see that green bar.
Yeah, exactly. And using a password manager, we always suggest that using a good password manager. We're not promoting any of them here, but you should only remember your password manager's password, and then
that one password, or the last pass you're ever going to need to know.
Yeah, only you need to remember one password, and then I mean all other passwords are not important because you can access them later on. And that's good. Maybe Jared, do you want to talk about category number 3?
Yeah, let's go for that. Okay, let me filter my list here. Wait, for some reason they've got V in front of them instead of C. Category V3, session management. Aha. So here's where we get into managing tokens. You make sure that your tokens are, and now this might be an interesting one for some people out there as well. Keeping your tokens in a cookie as opposed to in local storage, right? A lot of people think cookies are insecure because historically they were, but in modern browsers, cookies are actually the safest place to have session tokens nowadays, because we have flags like same site flag, HTTP only, strict. There's also using the host prefix. There's a whole slew of recent ones also that have come out. They don't get too much use yet, but and for that same reason, I can't remember what they are. But what they do is they secure your cookie from cross-site request forgery attacks, and token stealing from XSS, things like that. Make sure that they're sent over TLS only. So how and where to store your tokens, how to produce your tokens, making sure that you use a really strong algorithm on the server side for producing either stateful or stateless tokens, and all sorts of things like that. It's all about tokens.
Yeah, awesome. This category also discusses the key aspects of session management security, session binding, and session termination and defense against session management exploits. And do you have in your mind, Jared, any threat scenarios that come on frequently for this category?
Yeah, well, in general, I think One of the so some of the stuff you don't see as frequently is CSRF attacks. Most, I think, developers, because of the OWASP top 10, know about those. You don't see those as frequently anymore. So what do see? I more so see stalling for time while I think. I see use of very weak HMAC passwords for signatures. So when you use a JWT token, there's different encryption types that you can use and different signature types that you can use for signing those tokens. And one of them is RS512. I mean, or what is it's basically RSA, basically private key, public key, key pair. The other one that you commonly see is the HMAC version of that. And the HMAC version is not a bad solution, but it does suffer from, if you will use a weak password for that HMAC, then you can decrypt every single token, right? Especially if you're using the same password for every user, which is normally the case.
Yeah,
and so I do see that.
Exactly. The other one that I always not always, but I've seen that many times, is that people, they log out, but the session is still active.
That's a good one. Yes, see that a lot.
Yeah.
And for stateless, what would you suggest for somebody who's for stateful applications? The solution seems obvious. When somebody logs out, make sure that in the back end you delete that token. But what do you suggest for stateless applications?
That's a tricky question. For stateless, the design of JAW token is like this, but for sure, I believe we need to have a mechanism to invalidate those tokens on the logout. Actually, we should keep a list of all those invalidated tokens to not let them go through. Actually, because in general, sign up would be meaningless. Actually, the problem is that assume someone can capture that, like the guy logs in on a public computer or something like that. They logged out. There's I don't know, some spyware that took the token, and now the token is still active. They can use it. That's the thing. That's the thing. Like, for example, you go to washroom, and your laptop is in I don't know, coffee shop or something. You forgot to lock out your laptop. Someone just can inspect the page and get the token from cookie or session storage or anywhere else, actually, and then they can send it for themselves. And now you come back from the washroom, you sign out, you go, but the token is still active. That's not good, actually. The other one is that we've seen that storing tokens in session storage or local storage, we don't suggest that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Local storage is accessible by JavaScript, so any kind of cross-site scripting is going to be able to grab those up and send those to an attacker. And there was something else I wanted to add to that. Well, while I try to remember that, I also wanted to a second thing I wanted to add is that it can give a false sense of security. So when your web app has cross-site scripting in it, right? Securing the session token is a good thing to do, obviously, because it prevents an attacker from taking it and then using that session token arbitrarily. But it doesn't prevent them from actually using the session, because that's what XSS is in effect. It's running JavaScript with the user session. So just because that session token, I can't grab that as an attacker, I can still make that JavaScript do a specific thing. I would have to pre-program it and make it run a particular command. So it's not as easy to use as if I stole the session token, but it's just as powerful.
Yeah, you're right. We are going to talk about CSP, all those different in depths. But the thing is that sometimes maybe there is a sensitive thing that, it's not easy for JavaScript to kind of run that task or something like that. It requires mouse click, I don't know, captcha, for example. Maybe there is a functionality that if you have the token, there is a captcha, and then a user can bypass that, but the JavaScript code cannot bypass that.
Right.
And those are the situations that are kind of hard to bypass. And the category 3 is also interesting. We have gone through some of the items. But category 4, the access control category.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Jared.
Sure. I mean, this is the one where nowadays, this is where I find most vulnerabilities is in this category. It's a very short category, by the way. I think it's only, let me see, there's only 9 items in this category. But access control, whereas the previous 2 were about authentication, this one is about authorization. And to clarify, for those of you out there who don't know off the top of your head, because you don't think about it every day, authentication is you say who you are, and authorization is we know who you are now. Are you allowed to access this item? So one of the things that we do a lot is there's a great tool built into Burp that helps to automate this called Authorize. It's like authorize without the H. And what I do is I have 2 separate sessions. I log in as a low privilege user and I log in as the highest privilege user, usually admin. Then I will take the low privilege user's cookie and I put it into the authorize configuration. And then I start clicking around as the admin user. And what authorize does is it follows my clicks. It reads the administrator's click, and then it does the same, makes the same endpoint calls using the low privilege user. And then it also, as a bonus, does a third call using an unauthenticated user. And so it follows you all along, and then it gives you a list where it thinks calls are protected or not protected, or basically where all the responses look the same or where they look different. So that's a really useful one. The other place where it's not as useful, that particular tool, is when you want to do horizontally. So that's a vertical between low privilege and admin. But if I want to do between 2 medium privilege users and they have access to separate documents that neither of them should be able to see the others, this is an area that I see commonly. So one thing to look out for is when you make a request, if you make a request to grab, let's say, one of your documents that you store on this website, or one of your images or whatever you upload onto there, or whatever is accessible to you, if in the request is the user ID, that means that they're not using your user ID from your session token. They're using it from the request. And if I alter that to a different user, does that give me access to different documents? Or even if that isn't available, just trying, especially if document IDs are guessable, like if they're sequential numbers or human readable words, try altering them and just see what else is accessible to you out there. So that's what this whole section covers, is how to protect yourself against. So the horizontal one we refer to as IDOR, or indirect object reference vulnerabilities, and then everything else, the vertical, is just good old elevation of privilege.
Yeah, I see. Awesome. Yeah, there are 2 major categories for privileges, for this access control issue. Like, one is like horizontal privilege escalation issue, and the other is vertical. And for vertical, Jared has talked about that, like when you have a low privilege user, and suddenly you can gain high privilege access to the functionalities that are like admin functionalities. And other than that, like the horizontal one is like when the user has access to the functionality with the same level of access, but for the other, that is for the other user. And in general, this is one of the fruitful categories, and it's kind of, sometimes it takes a lot of time to test. It depends. Like, for example, let's assume like we can have a customer like with 5 different roles, and now, like, I don't know, hundreds of functionalities. You should go through like hundreds of functionalities for each role, and this is like a huge combination, and to find the issue. And on the other hand, the thing is that maybe even we can wrap it up after this section, and we can talk about the other sections in the upcoming episodes. But the CSRF thing, also the CSR, like cross site request forgery vulnerability, is also here. And in this category, for testing that, usually we need to test that manually, but you can use some of the plugins on Burp, such as Authorize or Auto Repeater, and just install them, and those plugins help you to make this process a lot faster, process of testing the access control issues. And yeah, that's it. And I believe we have covered like the 4 first categories. The category 5 is big, and we can skip that for this episode. Jared, do you have anything?
No, that's it for me.
Yeah, awesome. That concludes this episode of our AppSec Insiders podcast. We have a hope that you enjoyed this, and we are going to talk about ASVS more. ASVS is kind of the Bible for the application security. Remember to tune in next time as we delve deeper into the world of application and cloud security and explore new ways to protect our digital assets. Also, we appreciate your support and engagement. If you have any topic in your mind, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And AppSec Insiders at forwardsecurity.com is our email, and FW_SEC SEC on Twitter. You can find us there, and also in LinkedIn, just search for Forward Security. And for upcoming event, already Jared has talked about that. We have Collision between June 26th and June 29th. And come and join us there. And please also consider subscribing to our YouTube channel and our podcast. And have a good one.